Number one, the system options. So you know when you go up to that gear icon up at the top and you have all these document properties, all these system options in there, there's a lot in there, there's a lot going on, and you might not remember exactly where the option is, where you're supposed to go to find it. So up there you just start typing and it filters the results and links right to where you're supposed to be. So let's take a look at how this works, right? So we're up here in the gear icon. We have the search box. We just start typing. In this example, just kind of scrolling through with the arrow key. I forget sometimes where cosmetic threads might be. Oh, it's a document property. Find it right from there. And again, just start typing. The results filter immediately, and you can get right to your option. So check that out. The repeat last command, it's the enter key. You start sketching, you do pretty much whatever it is, and then you want to do it again. Instead of reactivating the command, just hit the enter key. This is a hard one to demo here, but I add this dimension, grab it, place it. I want a dimension again. I hit the enter key. I'll do this again. Right? So repeat the last command. It's just the enter key. It's also available from the file drop down too, for those people who like working that way. Right? Force rebuild. This is one that I want you guys to file away and remember that it's there and use it. And why it's beneficial is because it helps you with some geometry or models that might have some funky things going on. All right? It's a little bit different than the regular rebuild in that it rebuilds everything from start to finish, all of the geometry. The regular rebuild will just rebuild what's flagged, the geometry that's been modified or changed. Right? So this is what we really keep in our back pocket to try to fix a model that might be a little funky or something. Right? So in this example, what we're looking at is a model. I click on this, I change the dimension, and then what we're going to point out is how the feature tree has the rebuild icon on it, right? So just cut extrude 1 is going to rebuild if we press the rebuild option. Okay, this is just illustrating that difference between Control Q and the regular standard rebuild. All right, so rebuild, there we go. Reference planes. This is a great tip for you guys to use to help quickly create extra planes, right? So there's two ways that this could be done. If you pre-select two faces and then go to reference geometry plane, it'll plop a midplane in there right away. Or you can just quickly create an offset plane by holding the control key and just dragging away from the plane. So let's see how this works. All right, let's turn on our planes here. I'm going to just hold the control key. See the crosshair comes up, and I just drag away, and I'm immediately doing a new plane. And we can do this again and again and again all day long. Control, drag, and we just keep making planes, plane after plane. All right? And then you can always change it afterwards. It's quick to even get into it so you're in the plane command. If you're going to do an offset plane or add an angle or something to it. Now here's the midplane. The midplane, pick two faces, plops it right in the center. So I pre-selected these faces. I go right into Features, Reference Geometry Plane, and there's my midplane immediately in there. Let's do this again. So pre-selecting two faces. It looks at the distance, cuts them in half, and puts a reference plane in there. And how about that? I hit the Enter key here instead of going up to plane. Remember that one, number 2? Tip number 2. All right, recent files. I hope you guys are using this. If you have files that you like to have access to all the time, you can use the recent files to pin your documents, right? So you hit the R key. It opens up this nice big window with tiles of all of your recent components, or the components that you have pinned, your favorites, we'll call them, okay? So let's take a look at how this works, all right? So in the File menu, you'll see I have a couple of components pinned. Those top 3 are pinned. They'll always be there. I can always access them. And then down through the bottom, here's just a long list of all these other recent files that I've been working on. Pressing the pin will add them to my favorites. Here's the R key. Just press the R key, and this pops up. But I want to point this out. This little caret here, by using that tile, you can actually expand this and start picking the mode, whether you want lightweight, large design review, pick a display state, and pick a configuration and open it immediately to that specific configuration and display state. Right, so just working a little bit more efficiently here using these tools. Reload. I like this because really all it is just I'm going to close the file, not save, and I'm going to reopen it. That's all it is, but it saves you the time of doing that. Right? So I have this model here, this jug, and I bet this has never happened to you guys where you're coming in here, you do something, and you didn't mean to do that, and now you got this, errors, that looks nothing like a jug, right? So instead of closing, don't saving, and reopening, I'm just going to go to reload from the file drop-down menu, click reload, say OK, back to the file, right? So all it does is really automates that process of closing, don't save, reopen. There we go. So now I won't make that mistake again. The context menu. This is that toolbar that pops up as you're working, right? You click multiple things, and then just above your mouse, you'll have this bar that pops up, right? But I like to say that is kind of like a passive-aggressive type bar. It pops up, but if you don't directly go to it and pay attention, it disappears forever. It's like, well, you didn't care about me now for those 2 seconds. I'm gone. See you forever. Never, ever, ever, huh? So this is how you can get that bar back, right? All it has to do with is positioning your mouse where that bar was, and then hit the Control key. So there we go. There's my bar, my context menu. I'm just kind of hovering. I go to it. It appears, and it stays. I can use it. Now I go away. It's not coming back. But if I put my mouse back in that area that I have circled where the bar was and hit the Control key, it comes right back. It's all about having your mouse up in that area where it was. Right. So shortcut bars. This is a context type menu for the different modes like sketch, part, assembly, and drawing that you can have that's customizable through like a drag and drop. This is the customization interface. Go to shortcut bars and then just click which one you want to customize, and then drop your commands on and activate this bar by just hitting the S key. Okay? So what I'm doing here is just illustrating what the shortcut bar is, right? I want to add a fillet, so I hit S and grab the fillet tool. Now I hit S, I want to start a new sketch. And I hit S, and now it's the sketch features, or the sketch options for that. I hit S again. All I'm doing is hitting S, and that bar is popping up right next to where my mouse is. So I'm doing a few things. I'm minimizing my mouse mileage. I'm not going all over the screen. And I'm getting these tools right at my fingertips. Right? So it's more efficient, easier, quicker, doing all sorts of stuff here with that S key. The command search. How many people love this command? Because I love this thing. I still know where the commands are, but I use it just to get access to it, right? So you can type up there and just find a command, hit enter, activate it, but it does some other things too. You can actually customize the command manager from that box, and you can also find where a location lives in the software, or where a command lives in the software, okay? So let's take a look at a few of the functionalities here of the command search. Right, so unfortunately, it's kind of cut off on the screen there, but I'm up top. Right, I'm just typing COS for cosmetic thread. I don't use that very often, so I want to know where it is. I hit the show command location. That's SolidWorks moving my mouse. I didn't draw that. That red arrow is what SolidWorks puts in there to show you where a command lives in the software. All right, so my favorite tool with that is just typing like combine, C-O-M-B like I did, and just hit enter, and then the command activates. So I'm immediately into it. Right, immediately working with the combine tool. But if I use this very often, I want to customize my command manager. All I do is drag it from there onto the command manager, and I can add those tools there. Right? Pretty cool, huh? Yeah? All right. The D key. This is actually something that's relatively new to SolidWorks. And what it does is by pressing D, it moves these items, the confirmation corner, and breadcrumbs to wherever your mouse is, okay? So let's take a look at this. If I click on this face, up in the upper left corner is where the breadcrumbs pop up. But it's beneficial for me to move them nearby where my mouse is, right? So let's start this one over again, right? Notice up in the upper left corner, right? That was where breadcrumbs always is unless I press the D key. Then it moves it to my mouse. All right, and then you hit D again whenever the confirmation corner is active, like the check mark and the red X for cancel, and it moves it right to your mouse. Right, so it's not that groundbreaking of an enhancement, but really breadcrumbs is pretty great. It was added last year to the software, and essentially it offers you all of the things that you would ever want to find from your feature tree by just clicking on the entity in the screen. Right, so you click on a face, it brings up that sketch, the feature, the part, the body, the assemblies, all the mates. You can access everything directly graphically by clicking on it that you would from the feature tree. So you could essentially model with your feature tree collapsed. That's the way I like to look at it. All right, so there's some mates. We're looking at that in an assembly. All right, so again, hit D, and there's my breadcrumbs, just like that. All right. Now, selection. There are some neat selection tools that you guys could use. Like Select Other. That's something that makes picking difficult geometry pretty easy. Just pick it from a list. One of my favorites is Previous Selection, right? So let's take a look at this. Right, I have this model here. I have a couple of faces, right? Those are the faces I spend all day picking, an hour, whatever. And then I move it around, and then, oops, I just lost my picks. But I could just right-click and go to Previous Selection and get that back. And here's Select Other. If I hover my mouse over a piece of geometry and then right-click and hit Select Other, it'll allow me to pick things behind it, and it gives me a list of every entity, whether it's an edge or a face or a body or another part. Right, and here we're looking at Select Tangency. So instead of just left-clicking on an entity, I right-clicked and hit Select Tangency, and you can pick a continuous loop of tangent edges and faces. Right, so essentially just knowing that those tools are there, things like Previous Selection, Select Other, and Tangency by the right-click menu. All right? Customizing. No one likes to customize their interface, right? All you guys have the default SolidWorks interface, right? Yes? All right. There's just a lot of stuff, all right, to customize the interface. And I just want to go over just a few of the things, okay? So let's go to customize ... and that's how we go to customize it. I go to where commands are, and then from there you can just drag and drop your commands to wherever you want. And actually customize the heads-up display. That's what I wanted to point out here. Because I know a lot of people haven't realized that those buttons up there can be customized, so you can always have things like normal to or the measure command activated. And then here you have mouse gestures. It's another tab in the customize interface, and we go there. Now mouse gestures are great. I'm going to just show them right here. By just right-clicking and like wiggling my mouse, I get this wheel that pops up. And essentially then you can start accessing all these commands really quickly by just wiggling your mouse. But once you get faster, it becomes like a swipe operation. You just right-click and swipe to the right, right-click and swipe left or up and down, and you don't even see that wheel pop up, and you get a lot faster when you start using mouse gestures. Right, so you can add the OK button to it or cancel. So basically, it's all up to you. You want right, left, top, bottom to be whatever options or commands you want. All right. So since we're talking about customizing, what about the people that want to go to a new machine, or some people, like in some of my hands-on sessions out here, brought their SolidWorks settings with them so that they could work on these machines here as if they were back at their office. So how do you get that? You have the Save SolidWorks Settings. It used to be a tool from the Start menu to go to SolidWorks Tools and then copy Settings Wizard. However, now you can actually access it through the main SolidWorks screen, even with models open now this year. So it's pretty cool. So just click that drop down, hit the Save, Restore Settings, then it launches the operation to save or restore your settings. So let's do this. We're inside of SolidWorks here. I click the drop down, go to Save Settings. I want to save these. I pick which ones I want. System options, folders, toolbars, saved views, whatever. Finish. All right, now I'm sitting at a computer and I want to restore my settings. So here I hit Restore From File. I browse to where my registry file is, my SolidWorks settings file is, and hit Next, Finish, and I'll have my settings right there. All right? Pretty cool. So definitely keep note of that one if you guys like to take your system options with you. Right? Maybe you came here and you were going to take the CSWP or CSWA exam. Right? You want to have all your system settings with you. Right? So Control Tab browses the open documents, right? So you can go through the window drop-down menu and pick all the open documents, or you can hit Control Tab and a little window will pop up and you can browse through them. Similar to Alt Tab, the way Windows works, right? Alt Tab just cycle through all of the applications that are opened. Right? So let's take a look at this. So here's the window key. I have 8 files open right now. I'm just working on an assembly. I got a bunch of things. Or I can hit Control Tab and start cycling through them. Right? So Control Tab to go through all the other ones. It's a quick way to get those files open or switch between them. But it's also accessible here through the window drop-down menu. Okay? So Control Tab and the window drop-down. Now the feature manager. If you guys name your features, like maybe you name your sketches, or maybe you name your features, or obviously you probably name your parts in assemblies. But you can filter through the entire feature tree to find things. Okay, so let's just take a look at what that is. Here I am in a part. I'm up at the top of the feature tree, and all I do is click and start typing, and I can easily find that layout sketch that I was looking for. Or maybe I'm looking for the horizontal something here, or maybe the vertical something. Just start typing, filters the tree, you can quickly access those. Now here I am in an assembly, and this is even cooler because it filters for the parts, right? It actually hides the parts that aren't listed in the feature tree as you guys are filtering through there. Now obviously that's an option. Just right click and turn that off if you don't like it. But it filters the graphics area, hiding some components and then showing the ones that are listed. Right? So it's a pretty cool way to go there. Flattened tree view. Once we start dealing with models like sweeps and stuff that have a lot of geometry that has curves embedded into it that takes up multiple curves to create, you don't see those anymore, right? They're all underneath that, right? Like here on the left-hand side, I have the regular traditional feature tree with like the lofts in there. All the sketches that were used are under it. But on the one on the right, that's the flattened tree view with everything listed right next to each other, right? Not nested or anything, so you don't have your sketches being absorbed. Here's my cool spaceship, and I go up to the top to set the options for this. Basically just choose it to be on or off. So now it's on. Now you see all of my sketches, all of my features, all listed at the same hierarchy, all listed the same way there, right? So flattened tree view. Collapse the tree. Imagine you're in the scenario where you have an assembly that has a subassembly of a subassembly of a subassembly, and your tree gets expanded, and you are many, many, many layers deep into your feature tree. It can get kind of cluttered. So to collapse everything back to all the parent or the root parts, I guess we'll call them, you can use the collapse tree, and that's two ways. Either right-click and hit collapse items, or Shift-C. Here I am all the way down here. This subassembly, the mates are expanded. Here's this part that's expanded. All this stuff's going on here. All I need to do is hit Shift and C, and the tree gets collapsed. So I can start fresh. But anywhere you see collapse items, it doesn't matter where you are. You could do it on a mate, on a sketch, on a part. Just in the tree, right-click and hit collapse items, and that's what that will do. All right? So folders in the tree. A lot of people didn't realize that you can actually have folders in the tree. In the feature tree, you can have a bunch of things into a folder and have subfolders of that. Right? So if you want to group a bunch of features that are your base features or parts or whatever, it's a way to organize your feature tree. So let's just take a look at this. All I'm going to do here in this assembly is grab a couple of components. Right? I'm going to pick these 4 feet components and maybe the hardware that goes along with it. And then I'll right-click, say add to folder, and just like that, now I have a new folder, and I'm organizing my feature tree. And then here, I just like to point out a couple of these things. So there's these little nuggets in the feature tree that are pretty beneficial that a lot of people don't use. Things like sensors and the design binder. Those are the two I want to talk about now. So design binder, it's a cool way to basically embed documents to your model. Maybe you keep referencing this PDF that has some vendor data on it or some whatever it might be. You can actually link that and embed it into your file so it's up at the top of your feature tree. And then sensors. Sensors is just a cool way to track information. Like here, I want to always know what the mass of my component is, so I add a sensor, and now you can see it listed at the top of the feature tree, the mass of the component. Right, it's beneficial to track certain dimensions if you want. You can add dimensions to know them, or clearances, or proximity. And then all the information you could get out of simulation can be added to the sensors folder. And then you can have alerts added to it to flag you if you're having issues. You know, tell me if this part weighs less than this, or this part comes within this distance. But anyway, right-clicking on the top of the tree, I need to get to the Hide Show Tree Items option. That's where this is displayed. That's why a lot of people haven't found this, because it's hidden by default. So now that that's on there, let's use the Design Binder. And I want to embed these documents here. So right-click on Design Binder, say Add to File, and I can add the PDF. And here's my design journal. I've been taking some notes. This is in there too. All right, so it's this little thing at the top of the feature tree. Embed some documents, keep them with you with your file, have easy access to them. All right. Custom views. You orient your model, and then you want to be able to get back to that same orientation. You can add a saved view, a custom view, okay? And the way you do that is just basically hitting the space bar from the orientation box, picking that up, and clicking the Add New View button, all right? So here's my model. I'm in an isometric view right now. I actually really like this view, kind of like isometric, but with X going that way. So I hit the space bar, then I hit Add New View. So now that's always there. All right, so go normal to, I really like this one, so I'm going to save it. Space, and then that pops up. And now I can always go back to those. Those are all there. Those can be easily accessed in drawings when you're trying to drop views into drawings. You're trying to orient your model on your 2D drawings. But you could also press this Save button here, and then it becomes a globally saved view. So that camera orientation is saved now to all of SolidWorks, accessible to this SolidWorks system, which is pretty cool for those of you who are doing that. Rotate About Entity. This is a pretty simple one. You rotate using the middle mouse wheel, and it usually has the behavior that we're used to with spinning it around. But if you, with the middle mouse button, click on an entity first, so press the middle mouse button on an edge or on a face, it'll then set that entity as the rotation point, and it'll rotate referencing that. So let's show you how this works. I want to be able to twist this, right? So I pick this cylindrical face. With the middle mouse button, it becomes purple. Then I start rolling it around. And here, I want to rotate it about that. So I pick that entity, and now it's rotating about that, right? So there we go. Just middle mouse button to first pick it, and then it's business as usual by clicking with the middle mouse wheel to rotate the model around. And then zoom to fit. Just hit the F key, and your model gets fit to your screen. It's also a button that looks like that one up on the upper right-hand corner. That's right there on the heads-up display, all right? So let's take a look at this. So I'm zoomed in here pretty far. I want to fit my model, see everything. I press zoom to fit. Here, I'm not going to press the button. I'm going to find my model again by hitting the F key, like that, and here it comes. Right? Zoom in again, and then also double-clicking the middle mouse wheel will get you there too. So 3 ways. Up top, the zoom to fit button, F, or double-clicking the middle mouse wheel. Normal to. If we go normal to, it basically faces the model right to us, right? You hit normal to again, it'll flip it around 180 degrees. So now you're looking at the other side, right? All these planes have a positive orientation and negative orientation, like front and back. So hit or normal to again, and it'll flip it around. But a lot of times people might want to go normal to, but have this face be up. So you can do that by just picking a second face before you hit normal to, right? So let's take a look here. I want to go normal to this face. All right, but I want to look at it from the other side. So let's click normal to again. There it goes. Cool. Now, how about this? I pick the face, and now that other face there, that's what I want to be up. So pick those 2 faces, then hit normal to, and now that's going to be the face that's up. So orienting the way your model goes normal to. Just pick a second face using the control key, and then hit normal to. There we go. All right. Zoom to selection, especially when you have a assembly, right? And you have a whole lot of parts and you might not know where that is in the model. You're not seeing it, or you just want to zoom in right to it. Just click on it and hit the zoom to selection button. It's the one with the equal sign on it. So let's just take a look at how that works. And it's pretty simple. It's just right there in the context menu. It's the first option that's up there. Just click. How many times has that Dropbox thing been coming up? The whole time? All right. Sorry about that. So, yeah. Zoom to selection. That button right there goes right to the model that you're looking at, right? The entity, the model, could be a feature in a part, right? So use that to get to what you're looking for. So rotate about scene floor. The reason I'm pointing this one out is because typically some people get into this by accident and now their model isn't rotating the way that they're expecting. It's not the way that they want it to. Or maybe your mouse has this weird symbol on it. Just letting you know what it is. That's rotate about scene floor. It's an option set for your system, right, from the drop-down menu up top. Rotate about scene floor. And what it does is it tries to keep the model flat on a ground plane, right? So let's take a look at what this is. Here's regular orientation, regular rotating. Middle mouse wheel, and it rotates just like we've known in SolidWorks this whole time. But now from the view drop-down menu, I have this option, rotate about scene floor checked, and I'm going to move my mouse across the screen the exact same way here, but see how the model doesn't twist or rotate around, right? It's basically staying flat on that floor. So notice the symbol rotate about scene floor is on the mouse as you're rotating, right? So pointing that out just because a lot of people get to there by mistake sometimes. But if you want it, now you know where it is, right? The reference triad. Down in the lower left-hand corner, you have this XYZ reference triad here, but you can actually use that to help navigate around your model, right? So clicking any of the edges orients basically directly to it, or if you're using the Shift or Alt keys, you can start to rotate about those things down here, right? So we're at the reference triad. Clicking on the actual arrows representing the axes orients me directly to that plane, right? But now if I start clicking on them with the Shift key held, now it starts rotating about it at 90 degrees. Sometimes this could be very beneficial when you really just want to get a good view of your model and you want to rotate it about, a couple of degrees or whatever. So sometimes some people might say to you, hey, just rotate it just a little bit more that way, like 15 degrees, and instead of trying to guess with the middle mouse wheel, you can hit the Shift or Alt key and click the arrows down in the reference triad. So it's a good way to use the reference triad to help navigate around your model. Now this one, sketch relations, this has been one of my favorite enhancements lately to SolidWorks in sketching. But you wouldn't notice this if you were modeling in the traditional way. Like typically you'd hold the control key, and to make those two lines parallel or perpendicular, you'd have to hit both lines. And then you would have to add the relationship. But now you can just hit the point, the shared vertex, and it recognizes the two adjacent lines, and you can add the relationship that way. So let's take a look at this, right? I'm going to just add a perpendicular relationship here, but I'm going to click just the point, just the shared vertex there. Again, no holding the control key. Maybe my hand, I have my coffee in my hand or something. I don't feel like picking multiple entities or window selecting. Just pick the point directly. Start adding those relationships, perpendicular, tangent. Window and lasso select. How many people knew that this was added to SolidWorks recently? It was about 2015, I think. You can either be using the traditional box select or the new lasso select, similar to people who maybe use Photoshop or Illustrator. It's been in there for a long time. But the tip here is, did you know that going from left to right or right to left, whether the box is green or blue, changes the selection behavior, right? So go from left to right, now the selection box is blue. It picks only that one circle, only what was completely enclosed in that box. But now going left to right, it's green. Any entity that it touches gets picked, right? Now I switch to the lasso tool, going from clockwise direction, only what's fully encompassed, going counterclockwise, anything that it touches. But the lasso select tool is really cool because you can start, I don't really like those two circles in particular, so I'm just going to go around them. So it gives you some flexibility in choosing different entities that you want to pick, right? So auto relations, once you start sketching, you then get all of these like hash marks coming up or dashed lines all over your screen. If you have a sketch that has a bunch of entities in it, this can get very annoying. And this can be disabled by holding the control key, right? So these auto relations are disabled as you hold the control key. So I'm sketching here, draw the line. Now those dashed lines are coming up and it starts to snap to them to make it horizontal or coincident. But now with the control key, no matter how hard I try, I cannot add that relationship. That will not be coincident, or I will not be adding a perpendicular relationship to it. But if I want to get it back, simply release the control key, and then I can start snapping to those things to make it horizontal or vertical, or start adding those coincident relationships. Right? So that's the control key. Power trim. It's the SolidWorks Weed Whacker. I love this tool to basically just swipe over all sorts of stuff. But the tip here has to do with how to undo the power trim, because it's a crazy tool that not everybody knows how to control, me especially, apparently. But here's this star. I'm going to trim across some entities here, cutting them away. And I just keep going. Oh, I didn't want to do that. So I just go back and cross over that red box that was left behind by the path of the power trim. And it's continuous, right? As long as you're still in the command, you can easily undo those things just like that. But using the power trim tool, you can also use it for power extend. So I clicked on those two lines and extended away. Still in the same power trim tool to just add more to that line. Right? So it can be used that way as well, not just to whack geometry away. Dimension and tangency. This is one of the things that a lot of people struggle with when you're first learning SolidWorks. How to dimension to tangencies. You can either come back and modify the dimension to say I want to go from the max or the min from side A or B, or as you're adding it, by holding the shift key hold the shift key, but only for the geometry that you want to add the tangent relationship to, right? So notice here what I'm showing is on the one on the right, I held the shift key for both of those circles, right? Up top, I only held the shift key for the second circle. And that's how I was able to do that as I was adding it. But I'll point this out here in the first part of this video. When you click on it, you can go to leaders and then come down to the bottom and just change that way too. So you don't have to remember the fancy shift key. So you can go specifically between the arcs. Say arc 1 is going to be the center, arc 2 is the middle, or the minimum, or the maximum, right? So go ahead and start changing that. So now we're starting to add these on the fly. We're holding the shift key to pick both of those, right? Now I'm going to just do the shift key for the second one. So it's going to go to that first arc center, and now it's going to go to the tangency here. But now I'll do shift, and it's going to go both. Shift, not shift. Right, so I bet most of you knew that, but for the people that probably didn't, it's very helpful. So creating a sketch on a model edge, you don't have to have a plane in there first to start sketching. You can hit the edge and then immediately hit sketch, and you'll start sketching there. It actually adds a reference plane for you. And the only thing to point out here is that it's adding a reference plane that is normal to that edge, and the end of that edge closest to where you picked. Does that make sense? Right, so the edge is two ends, closer to where you pick, that's where the plane gets dropped. So I pick that edge and then go right up to sketch, and you probably won't even notice it, but now I was in sketch mode and I had a plane added. How about I add a new plane down here? Just start sketching, right? Those planes are added for me because that's what the plane I was sketching on. But notice here, it's on that vertex and normal to that edge, right? So let's just take a look at this here. This is the line, hit the edge rather, and then sketch. And do this again, edge, sketch, and it's going to put the plane down there, and you could just start sketching or hit exit sketch. Now you don't have a sketch, but you have a plane right there too. So think about it. Fully defining sketch. This is very, very useful for me when I'm feeling super lazy. If I start drawing sketch geometry and I don't feel like adding a lot of relationships to it, I'll just use the fully defined sketch and then start editing those dimensions. So here's my, I don't know what I was drawing, but I go up to the top, find under the display delete relations, the fully defined sketch option. I can either pick the entities that I want, those 3 circles, or I could have gone back and hit the first option, that is to do every single entity in that sketch. So some housekeeping here, but I have a fully defined sketch. Changing your sketch type. So as you're sketching, pressing the A key will toggle through all the options. You know there's like 6 options for slots, 2 for circles, 400 different rectangles you could draw. By pressing the A key, watch up there, all I'm doing is pressing A, and it's just cycling through all the different options. Here I'm at my rectangle. I'm going to hit A because I want to go back to the corner rectangle. Or I'm going to do the parallelogram. But another thing to point out here is I just used the auto transition to arc tool. That's also activated by pressing the A key, okay? So you could be drawing a line and then press A, and then all of a sudden you're drawing a tangent arc from that line that you had just sketched. So here, I'm going to draw a vertical line, and then I'm going to press A. It turns to an arc, so I can just quickly draw a tangent arc. And then I'm back into the line tool, but I could hit A again and go back to the arc tool. Just pointing this one out, because this is kind of new. In the context menu, when you click on entities, the one that is closest to what it is will be highlighted, right? So if you have a line drawn that's kind of skewed at an angle, and you want to make it vertical or horizontal, you can add the relationship here by just clicking on the entity, and if it's closer to horizontal, it'll be boxed in. This is beneficial for people who maybe aren't drawing on the front plane, where horizontal and vertical, maybe they don't matter because they're on some skewed plane, right? And they can't visualize what it means. So you can find out that, and also to point out exactly what that box is around the vertical and horizontal relationships. All right, so I want to add, I don't know, a vertical or horizontal relationship to those 2 points. You ever try adding it and you added the wrong one, all of a sudden the stuff goes away? Or you get an error maybe? Yeah, so you can use this to help you know, but ahead of time, which one it's closest to. Or this line, right? I want to add it there. So the functionality that's been there for a long time is over on the left-hand side, the properties. It actually will show in bold what it was, or what it was closer to for like lines in particular. But then added to, I think SolidWorks 2015 was that dashed box around it. So it's a newer addition to the tool. I like to point out, people ask, hey, what's that box around there? Well, that's what it is, right? Click the 2 points. There we go. I'm going to make vertical. Creating only one line. This is one that I tell to a lot of people who are new to SolidWorks. They may have used a different tool that used drag and sketching functionality for lines. But anyway, normally when you draw a line, it looks like this, right? You click, and you keep drawing lines all day long, right? But what about the time you just want one line? You don't want to have to hit the escape key. If you click and hold the mouse button and drag, and then release, at the second endpoint, it's going to draw just one line. And you can snap to relationships and add them to that way. That all works. Right, so instead of it being this typical chain, all we're doing is instead of clicking and then releasing and then moving the mouse around and placing one endpoint and then the next endpoint and the next endpoint like a chain, all I'm going to do is click to place the first endpoint and drag and release, and that's my line. All right, so that's drawing one line. Adding arc dimensions. This is pretty cool. Let's just see how this works. So I'm using the Smart Dimension tool, and I click the endpoints and the arc. You have to pick all 3 points, and then you can add an arc length dimension instead of this, right? Typical behavior is that, like the radius. hold the control key, pick all of the points, and then it goes into the arc length dimension. Pick all three.
Order doesn't matter.
So, yep, order doesn't matter. It's all three, just anyway. Close sketch to the model. You have basically this little L shape in there, and instead of drawing the rest of the lines to make your box for the extrusion, you can use this option to use the model edges to close it. So let's take a look at that. Here, I'm just going to draw these two lines, and instead of finishing it off, because I'm being super lazy again, I'm just going to go to the extrusion here, and this is the option. Use your model edges to close the sketch. Basically make sure the arrow matches. That's what I'm doing there with the reverse option. And it fills it in, and just like that. Right? So that's using the model edges to basically close up my sketches, to make a closed sketch shape.
Will it be multiple? Say your edge was some crazy shape.
I'm not sure. Probably. It probably will, because it's just the model geometry. So Sketch Expert. This is a great tool to help you understand what's going on with your sketches if you're having issues with them, like things are overdefined maybe or unsolvable. So we have a sketch that gets blown up, kind of like this. And I click the Sketch Expert. I'm sorry about that, with Dropbox notifications. I think I just turned the Wi-Fi off, so. Overdefined, down in the lower right corner. If I click on that, that launches the Sketch Expert. You can also access it through a drop-down in the tools up top. But what this is doing is showing me the different scenarios that will make the sketch solvable, so that I can pick which thing I need to remove. Here it's telling me, here's all the things that are causing the issues. Remove one of them. And using that tool, I can visualize my options and help figure out what it is that's causing my sketch to be unsolvable. Okay, so that's the Sketch Expert. The Biad. This is my name for this tool added in SolidWorks 2015. It's a very quick way for us to add angle dimensions. The way you access it is by clicking the line and then the end point of that line, and that will drop the biad down there. And then you pick from that those arrows that represent the construction geometry that you would have drawn to add that dimension. And this works in drawings too, which is pretty good. So here's a couple of lines. Typically I would have to do that, right? I have that construction line in there, or maybe you have another model entity in there that you can use. But what if you don't have that? Like over here on the right, I click the line, then the end point, then the line or the arrow that represents the geometry that I would have had in there, and I can drop my angle dimensions in just like that. And like I said, it works in drawings too, so that's pretty beneficial. Right? The line, the end point, and then the reference direction. Okay? Your spin box. The spin box increments. You can actually change that. You know, on the right-hand side there, let's look at that dimension that's 155, right? On the right-hand side, I can click those arrows up and down. That's pretty obvious, right? But if you didn't know why that looks so weird under it, that's SolidWorks' way of drawing a thumb wheel. That's what it's supposed to look like, just so you guys know. I know some people have asked what that is. But that can be clicked on and dragged across to increase any of those values. Right, so let's take a look at that. I'm going to be in here, and I can click the arrows up or down to increment it. I can change that increment by clicking that plus sign there next to the reverse direction button. Right, so I'm going to come in here, increment it by 10. Maybe I want to go to 5 or something, so I change the increment there. Okay, so that's manually changing the increment. Let's go back here, and I'm going to use the spin, my middle mouse wheel, the spinner. So I'm just going to spin it, moving it in increments of 10. But I know the keyboard shortcut here, so if I hold Alt, it's going to reduce it 10% or to a tenth of it. Control multiplies it by 10, so now it's incrementing by 100. Okay, so holding Control dramatically increases the value. Holding Alt dramatically reduces that value. So with the combination of that and the middle mouse wheel, we can start spinning that around and change those values there. Single command per pick. This is a system option that you can have so that you're only drawing one circle or maybe one line, one dimension, right? It's like the once and done setting for it. But maybe you want to draw one time, like maybe tomorrow morning I might want to draw 2 circles at once, so I could just double click on the circle command and then it becomes sticky. Right? So 1 circle, go over here, again, 1 circle, right? Single command per pick. But now I'm double clicking on it and it's going to be active just like it always is, typically, okay? So single command per pick works with dimensions too, or double click it and then it's on. So that's a system option that you can have set. Pierce versus coincident. There are 2 different relationships that you can add. So what is the difference? Well, coincident is like a more generalized pierce to me. That's the way I look at it. Where pierce is coincident at one particular point, and it is that one point where the entity crosses its plane. Okay, so let's take a look at an example here that illustrates this, right? I have that rectangle, and I'm going to add a coincident relationship from that edge to that point. The coincident relationship would be anywhere along that line that I just drew using the Convert Entities tool. It could be, it's coincident still, right? But anywhere along that line. Where pierce is going to be exactly where that line crosses that particular plane. So just wanted to visualize what the difference is between pierce and coincident, because we do get a lot of questions about that. Right? So coincident is anything along the projection of it, where pierce is that one particular point where it crosses the plane. Override dims on drag or move. This is another system option that you can have. And basically it overrides the dimensions and then updates them after you're done moving your geometry around. So let's take a look at it here. This is fully defined, right? I start dragging it around though with that system option. It overrides the dimensions and then resets them to wherever you placed it. All right, so with the option on, I can drag on this circle and I can start to change its size even though it's fully defined. So that's, again, another system option that we can have. Derive sketch. Derive sketch is pretty great. It's not just a copy and paste of a particular sketch, but it is actually linking to another sketch. It sets up and establishes a link. So if that original sketch changes, the derived sketch will also change. And also, while working with the derived sketch, you cannot do things to it. So I have that sketch picked, the face picked, go to File, Derive Sketch. Here's this. Notice I don't have any sketch tools open. I'm in a sketch right now. I don't have any tools available to me. All I have are the options to locate it. And now if that original base flange changes, the derived sketch will also change. Right? Like here. I'm going to get rid of those circles here. Let's take a look at this. There, my derived sketch has also changed. So it's not just copy and paste, okay? It's pretty cool. So the way to get to that is you first pick the sketch that you want to create the copy of, and then the face where you want this to be, and then derive sketch from the drop-down menu, okay? Reset their dragging. If you start dragging entities around, like a circle or squares or in spline for this, if you right-click while you're in that process, it'll basically reset it to the previous state, to what it was before you started dragging it around. And the reason I tell people this is because most of the time people just accidentally hit right-click while they're dragging some stuff around, and they don't know why it stopped moving, right? So just pointing this out for you. Here we go. I'm dragging this around, dragging it around, but I'm going to right-click, and it goes back to where it was. Not that exciting. Just a right-click, and it goes back. But I like pointing that out so you guys are aware of how SolidWorks is working. So you're not really thinking that there's like a ghost or something, making SolidWorks work in particular ways. Performance evaluation. This is a great tool to get statistics about your parts. You want to know what's causing all the long rebuild times or something in your model. You can look at this and find out what feature is causing the longest rebuild time. So that's something that is very beneficial for you if you have an assembly that is taking minutes and minutes and minutes to rebuild, so you can start to identify what might be causing those problems. So let's take a look at this. We're under Evaluate, and there's Performance Evaluation. And just like that, I click the button, and I just am presented with a long list of statistics about all of the features that I have in my model. And I find that, actually, it's a lot of those things that's causing this model long rebuild times are all from my mold tools in there, those mold features, like the lip and groove, snap groove. So maybe I might think about suppressing those or creating a configuration without those to help me with my model. And once I identify those features that are maybe causing long rebuild times, I can use this to freeze them in their current state, so you can't edit it. So this feature that I'm talking about now is called Feature Freeze. And Feature Freeze is a great option to basically lock the features so you can't edit them, but also freezes them from rebuilding. So if you use that last tool to identify long rebuild times, you can enable the freeze bar as a system options and drag it down below the options that you don't want to be rebuilt anymore. Okay, so let's take a look at that. I have that option turned on from my system options, and all I do is drag from the top. That's it. But now I'm clicking on these features. There's nothing I can do to them. I can't edit them or anything. But below them, below that line, I can. All right, so that's all it is, freezing the features so that we're not editing them, and it's not participating in any of our rebuild times. Quick up to surface. I like using up to surface for a lot of my extrusions because it's just pretty easy instead of having to know a dimension, right? Well, if I'm in the sketch that I'm at, here I'm in my Boss Extrude, all I do is double click on the face that I want to represent up to surface. You don't have to go into the drop down menu and do that. You can just directly go, double click on that face, and there you go, you're doing your up to surface extrusion. So pretty quick. Dynamically load FeatureWorks. This is pretty cool. You're working with imported geometry, right? You have something that's maybe a fillet or a hole, and you don't want to use FeatureWorks on the whole thing. You just wish this one fillet or one hole could be modified or edited. Well, you can by just clicking on that face and then hitting Edit Feature. That forces FeatureWorks to load, recognize the feature, and now it's listed in your tree. So let's take a look at this. I have this imported geometry here. This is my solid. I have a fillet and a chamfer up there. All I'm doing is clicking on the face and hitting Edit Feature, and I'm doing it one by one, loading FeatureWorks, creating these features that I can now edit. So I wanted that to be a 10 millimeter fillet instead. So what I did was click on the face, Edit Feature, created the fillet, and now I can work with it. So clicking on the entities and then Edit Feature. Split line, this is great by basically splitting up a face with a sketch, right? I have a sketch, and I'm going to project it on there, and I'm going to cut the face into multiple faces, right? So here I have this sketch. All it is right now is 2 lines, and I want to split the table with those 2 lines into now 3 faces. So now I have this. It makes it very easy to add appearances. Maybe you want to change the color of it, add text to it. You can use a split line to add text to it. And it's really beneficial for simulation. I use simulation a lot, and I use split lines very often for simulation if I'm trying to focus in on an area where I want a boundary condition to be like a fixture or a loading. The width mate. This is my favorite mate. I love the width mate. If anybody talks to me throughout SolidWorks courses or something, they know I have a love affair with a width mate. Okay? But what it is it's a centering mate. You pick 2 faces and then 2 other faces, and it basically lines them up. Look at all the options, the variations of it that it could be used for down there, right? So let's take a look. I pick 4 faces and then hit mate, and that is going to add the width mate, just like that. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's going to center that component up, right? So that is the width mate. It's under the advanced mates option. Hide show components. Maybe you don't want to basically click on a component and hide it. You can use this keyboard shortcut by hitting Tab to hide or Shift Tab to show. All right, so here's a component. I'm just hovering over them, hitting Tab, Tab to hide them. Now I want to show them again, so I position my mouse where the model is. I have to know where the model is. Then hit Shift-Tab, and it comes back. All right, Tab to hide, Shift-Tab to show. Rotating components. We all know that if I click on a component with the left mouse button and drag it, it's going to move, right? But if you right-click on a component, you can rotate them. And a lot of people haven't realized that. So instead of left-clicking and dragging just like that, I'll rotate it by using the right mouse button. So I click on it with right mouse button and rotate them. So it's a quick way to orient your parts, okay? Instead of dragging them with the left mouse button. Assembly visualization. This is another tool that's very similar to the performance evaluation tool, but this one will actually graphically show you the results of things like rebuild time or graphics triangles or the mass, or even custom properties like who made it, who's the vendor, what state is this project in, right? So let's take a look at this. It's another tool under Evaluate, Assembly Visualization. And here's my list, and I click on the color bar over there, and then all the colors appear, right? And I can filter things like graphics triangles. Maybe one of your components has 400,000 graphics triangles in there, and the other ones have maybe 1,000. You might want to look at that one that has that many, huh? Could be causing some issues. Now this one, I use this one on a daily basis. You get an assembly, and instead of filtering through by parts or assemblies, you can do this option all the way on the left hand, all the way on the right-hand side of the screen to filter for the top level assembly and open immediately the assembly that you want, right? This happens every day when people send me files. Open top level assembly. It hides all of them and it points to directly which assembly I'm going to want to open. It's the top level assembly. And dragging components around, you have the control and drag functionality just like in PowerPoint or in Word to create copies of components. So control and drag from the feature tree or from the graphics area, holding the control key and dragging creates copies of my components. And you have transparent geometry. It's impossible to pick it if there's something behind it. You can't pick it. So you hold the Shift key, and then it behaves just like it was shown completely, right? So here I have some transparent components like the side there, but it has geometry behind it. That's why I can't pick it. But now holding the Shift key, then I can go ahead and pick the components just like I would normally. So holding Shift, and it lets me pick all these components just like that, right? Shift, there we go. Okay? Isolate and display states. So isolating components, basically you pick them, hit isolate, and it hides everything else but shows just these. But what you can do is click that Save button and actually create a display state there, saving that hide show status of the components, right? So I clicked on just those couple there, hit isolate, and now I'm going to hit the Save button, and I can save that as a display state so I can easily get back to that option, right? The hide show. And here's where my display states are, right there in the upper right-hand corner of the feature tree. All right. And lastly, we have the magnifying glass. Hitting the G key brings up this nice big circle that allows you to zoom in on certain areas without moving the entire view orientation. Right, so here we are. I want to zoom in on that component there, so I hit G, and watch this. I can zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, move it around at that zoom level. Hit the G key, and I'm zooming in on just that little area there. All right.